The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across Marcus Wellington's tailored Armani suit as he sneered at the young waitress standing before him. His Rolex Submariner gleamed under the restaurant's ambient lighting, worth more than most people earned in a year. The exclusive Meridian Club on Manhattan's Upper East Side had never witnessed such a moment, when a billionaire's arrogance collided with unexpected truth. "Serve me properly or leave," Marcus had laughed, his voice dripping with condescension. But what happened next would shatter everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and the woman standing across from him with quiet dignity in her eyes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The October rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Wellington Industries' 42nd floor boardroom, each droplet a staccato beat against the glass that Marcus Wellington barely noticed. He was too busy savoring his latest victory. The hostile takeover of Henderson Manufacturing had just been approved by the board, adding another $2 billion to his already obscene fortune. At 38, Marcus had built an empire that spanned 3 continents, crushing competitors with the same casual indifference he showed when stepping on an ant. "Sir, your dinner reservation at the Meridian Club is confirmed for 8 o'clock, his assistant Patricia announced from the doorway. She'd learned long ago to keep her interactions brief and professional. Marcus had a reputation for explosive temper tantrums that could end careers with a single phone call. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop screen, where stock prices danced in green numbers that represented millions of dollars flowing into his accounts. "Make sure they have my usual table ready. And Patricia?" He finally glanced up, his steel-gray eyes cold as winter morning. "If anyone from Henderson's team calls, tell them they can collect their severance packages from security. I don't want their sob stories cluttering my schedule." The satisfaction in his voice was unmistakable. Henderson Manufacturing had been a family business for 3 generations, employing over 800 people in small-town America. Now it would be stripped for parts, its assets sold off, and its workforce scattered to the wind. Marcus called it maximizing shareholder value. Others called it heartless. As Patricia retreated, Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. His corner office stretched out like a monument to capitalism. Italian leather furniture, original Picasso paintings, and a mahogany desk that had once belonged to a railroad baron. Through the windows, Manhattan spread out below him like a conquered territory, its lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. He thought about his father, Harold Wellington, who had started with a small construction company in Queens. "Money talks, son," Harold used to say, "but respect has to be earned." Marcus had dismissed such quaint notions years ago. Respect was for people who couldn't afford to buy whatever they wanted. Fear and influence were far more reliable currencies. The drive to the Meridian Club took longer than usual due to the weather. Marcus sat in the back of his black Bentley Mulsanne, reviewing emails on his phone while his driver Thomas navigated the flooded streets. The club occupied an entire brownstone building that had once housed Manhattan's elite since 1892. Membership required not just wealth but pedigree, something Marcus had purchased along with his first $100 million. The maître d', Charles, greeted him with the practiced deference that money commanded. "Good evening, Mr. Wellington. Your table is ready, and I've taken the liberty of chilling your preferred Chateau Margaux." Marcus barely acknowledged the greeting as he was escorted through the dining room. The Meridian Club's interior was a testament to old-world luxury. Persian rugs, oil paintings of long-dead industrialists, and the soft murmur of conversations conducted in hushed, reverent tones. Here, deals worth billions were discussed over aged whiskey and prime steaks that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His usual table sat in a prime location, offering a view of the dining room's hierarchy. Marcus could observe who dined with whom, which conversations seemed animated, and which faces looked worried. Information was power, and power was profit. That's when he first noticed her. The young woman moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her uniform crisp despite the dinner rush. She couldn't have been more than 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and intelligent green eyes that seemed to take in everything. What struck Marcus immediately was her posture, straight-backed and confident, lacking the subservient demeanor he expected from service staff. She approached his table with a professional smile, order pad in hand. "Good evening, Mr. Wellington. I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Can I start you with your usual appetizer? Marcus looked up from his phone, irritated by the interruption. He'd been in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections, and the numbers weren't adding up the way his CFO had promised. "You're new," he stated flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. "Yes, sir. I started here last week." Sarah's voice remained steady, professional. "I understand you prefer the lobster bisque, followed by the dry-aged ribeye, medium rare, with the wine pairing selected by Charles?" The fact that she'd already memorized his preferences should have impressed him, but Marcus was in a particularly foul mood. The Henderson deal, while profitable, had generated negative press that was affecting Wellington Industries' stock price. His ex-wife Rebecca had also chosen that morning to increase her alimony demands, threatening to drag their divorce proceedings into an even more public spectacle. "I prefer servers who understand their place," Marcus replied coldly, his voice carrying enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "When I'm reviewing important documents, you wait until I acknowledge you. That's how proper service works." Sarah's smile never wavered, though something flickered behind her eyes. "Of course, sir. I apologize for the interruption. Should I return when you're ready to order?" Marcus made a show of checking his Patek Philippe watch, a limited edition worth more than most people's houses. "I suppose I have a few minutes for dinner before my next call with Tokyo. But understand this. I expect perfection. I don't tolerate mistakes, delays, or attitudes. I eat here because the Meridian Club maintains standards that other establishments can't match." "I understand completely, sir." Sarah's professionalism remained intact, though Marcus detected a slight tension in her jaw. "I'll make sure your dining experience meets those standards." As Sarah walked away to place his order, Marcus found himself studying her more carefully. There was something different about this one, and composure that wasn't easily rattled, a dignity that seemed incongruous with her position. Most servers at the Meridian Club were either aspiring actors working between auditions, or college students from wealthy families earning spending money. This young woman carried herself like someone with purpose beyond taking orders and serving food. Marcus returned to his phone, pulling up news articles about the Henderson acquisition. The headlines were predictably critical. Wellington Industries destroys another American legacy. Heartless billionaire leaves, 800 families jobless. The human cost of Marcus Wellington's greed. He deleted each notification without reading beyond the headlines. Public opinion was irrelevant when you had enough money to buy politicians, judges, and journalists. Sarah returned with his wine, presenting the bottle with the same ceremony Charles would have provided. She knew the proper procedure, showing the label, removing the cork with precision, offering a taste before pouring. Marcus sampled the wine and nodded curtly, expecting her to retreat while he continued his work. Instead, she lingered for a moment, studying his face with those perceptive green eyes. "Is there anything else I can do for you right now, Mr. Wellington?" Something in her tone suggested she wasn't just talking about dinner service. Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. There was intelligence there, and something else, a quality he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear, which surprised him. People usually approached him with either terror or greed, hoping to either avoid his wrath or curry his favor. "Just bring my food when it's ready," he said dismissively, returning his attention to his phone, "and try not to interrupt again unless the building is on fire." Sarah nodded and moved away, but Marcus found his concentration broken. He watched her serve other tables, noting how she interacted with different guests. With elderly couples, she was patient and attentive. With young professionals, she was efficient and friendly. But with everyone, she maintained that same quiet dignity he'd observed earlier. Marcus prided himself on reading people. It was essential for business success. You had to know who could be bought, who could be intimidated, and who might pose a threat. Sarah didn't fit into any of his usual categories, and that bothered him more than he cared to admit. The lobster bisque arrived precisely 5 minutes later, garnished perfectly and steaming hot. Sarah set it down with practiced ease, ensuring the bowl was positioned correctly and the accompanying bread was within reach. "Your entree will be ready in approximately 12 minutes, she informed him. "Is the temperature of the soup to your liking?" Marcus tasted it without acknowledging her question. The bisque was excellent, as always, but he was more interested in testing this young woman's composure. "It's adequate," he said, though it was clearly superb. "Try to time the main course better. I don't like waiting between courses." "Of course, sir. I'll coordinate with the kitchen to ensure perfect timing." As Sarah walked away, Marcus noticed other diners watching their interaction with interest. The Meridian Club thrived on gossip and social positioning, and his treatment of the new server would undoubtedly become dinner conversation at other tables. Good. It reinforced his reputation as someone who demanded excellence and wouldn't tolerate mediocrity. But as he continued eating, Marcus found himself increasingly curious about Sarah. She moved through the dining room like she belonged there, not subservient but certainly professional. When other servers seemed flustered by demanding customers, she remained calm. When one of the club's more difficult members, Harrison Blackwell, heir to a shipping fortune, snapped his fingers at her imperiously, she approached with the same dignified composure she'd shown Marcus. The ribeye arrived exactly 12 minutes later, cooked to perfection and plated with artistic precision. Sarah set it down, along with the accompanying vegetables, and asked if he needed anything else. Marcus cut into the steak, savoring the perfect medium-rare texture, but found himself watching Sarah rather than enjoying his meal. Something about her nagged at him like a puzzle with missing pieces. In his experience, people worked service jobs at exclusive establishments for specific reasons. They needed the money, wanted to network with wealthy clientele, or were using the position as a stepping stone to something else. Sarah seemed different, purposeful in a way that suggested she wasn't just marking time until something better came along. As the evening progressed, Marcus's mood continued to darken. The Tokyo call had gone poorly. His partners were having second thoughts about a planned expansion into Southeast Asian markets. His legal team had called with updates on 3 separate lawsuits, filed by former employees claiming wrongful termination. And his mother had left increasingly frantic voicemails about his absence from his nephew's birthday party, another family obligation he'd ignored in favor of work. By the time Sarah returned to check on his dinner, Marcus Wellington was primed for confrontation, his legendary temper simmering just beneath the surface of his expensive suit and practiced charm. What happened next would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The crystal water glass slipped from Marcus's fingers as he reached for his phone, sending ice water cascading across the white linen tablecloth and onto his Italian leather shoes. The cold shock snapped him out of his brooding thoughts about the disastrous Tokyo conference call, but it also ignited the volatile temper that had made him legendary in boardrooms across Wall Street. "Damn it," Marcus muttered, jumping back from the table as water dripped onto the Persian rug beneath his feet. Several nearby diners glanced over with barely concealed curiosity, their conversations pausing as they sensed drama unfolding at Marcus Wellington's table. Sarah appeared at his side within seconds, having witnessed the accident from across the dining room. She carried a stack of fresh napkins and moved with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to handling crises. Without hesitation, she began blotting the water from the table, her movements quick but careful to avoid disturbing his remaining food and wine. "I'm so sorry about this, Mr. Wellington," she said, her voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "Let me get this cleaned up for you right away. I'll have housekeeping bring something for your shoes." But Marcus was beyond reason. The water on his $6,000 Berluti Oxfords felt like the final insult in a day filled with professional setbacks and personal irritations. His face flushed red above his platinum collar, and his voice rose to a level that commanded attention throughout the dining room. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he snarled, stepping back further as Sarah continued cleaning. "Incompetence. I come to the Meridian Club because it's supposed to maintain certain standards, and instead I get clumsy service that ruins my evening and my property." Sarah looked up from her cleaning, her green eyes meeting his angry gaze directly. There was no fear in her expression, no cowering apology that Marcus expected. Instead, she straightened to her full height and regarded him with what could only be described as measured assessment. "The glass was positioned correctly, sir," she said quietly, her tone respectful but firm. "Sometimes accidents happen, even in the finest establishments." The matter-of-fact response caught Marcus off guard. In his experience, service staff responded to his anger with either groveling apologies or defensive hostility. Sarah's calm acknowledgement of reality, without accepting blame for something clearly beyond her control, was entirely unexpected. "Are you suggesting this is my fault?" Marcus's voice carried across the dining room, causing conversations at other tables to stop entirely. Harrison Blackwell, seated 3 tables away, leaned forward with obvious interest. Mrs. Pemberton, widow of the steel magnate, actually lowered her opera glasses to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Sarah finished cleaning the table and folded the damp napkins with deliberate precision. When she spoke, her voice remained steady, but something had shifted in her demeanor, a subtle steel that hadn't been there before. "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Wellington. I'm simply stating facts. The glass was placed where it should have been placed. You reached for your phone, and your elbow caught the rim. It happens to everyone." She paused, studying his flushed face with those perceptive green eyes. "Even billionaires are subject to the laws of physics." A collective intake of breath rippled through the nearby tables. In the rarefied atmosphere of the Meridian Club, where deference to wealth was an unspoken commandment, Sarah's response bordered on revolutionary. Marcus felt his carefully constructed authority challenged in the most public way possible. Charles, the maître d', materialized beside their table like a diplomatic ghost, his face a mask of professional concern. "Is everything all right here? Perhaps we could relocate Mr. Wellington to another table while we attend to the cleanup." "Everything is not all right," Marcus snapped, his fury now directed at both Sarah and the situation spiraling beyond his control. "Your new server seems to think she can lecture me about responsibility while my dinner is ruined and my shoes are soaked." Sarah stepped back slightly, but her posture remained straight, dignified. She looked at Charles, then back at Marcus, and for a moment something passed across her face, a flash of emotion that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Disappointment? Pity? Whatever it was, it infuriated him further. "Perhaps," Sarah said carefully, "we could discuss this in a way that doesn't disturb the other guests. I'm happy to take responsibility for the cleanup and ensure your evening continues pleasantly." But Marcus was past the point of reasonable discourse. The combination of business frustrations, personal stress, and now this public challenge to his authority had pushed him beyond his already limited capacity for patience. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that made several elderly club members wince. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the entire dining room. "I could buy this entire building with pocket change. I could have you fired with a single phone call. Hell, I could probably buy the restaurant where you'll be working next week after Charles throws you out of here." The dining room had gone completely silent. Even the soft classical music piped through the sound system seemed to fade into the background. Every eye was focused on the confrontation unfolding between Manhattan's most ruthless businessman and a young waitress who refused to be intimidated. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, watching Marcus with an expression that was becoming increasingly unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet enough that people at nearby tables had to strain to hear her words. "Yes, Mr. Wellington, I know exactly who you are." Something in her tone, a subtle emphasis on the word exactly, sent an unexpected chill down Marcus's spine. But he was too caught up in his rage to analyze the feeling. Instead, he pressed forward, determined to reassert his dominance over the situation. "Then you understand that I expect a certain level of service. I expect competence, respect, and acknowledgement that my time and presence here are valuable." He gestured broadly at the dining room, taking in the watching faces of New York's elite. "I don't expect to be argued with by someone whose entire monthly salary wouldn't cover my wine bill." Sarah's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something deeper underneath, not anger, but a profound sadness that seemed entirely disproportionate to their confrontation over spilled water. "You're absolutely right," she said softly. "Your time is valuable. Your presence here is significant, and you deserve respect." She paused, studying his face with those intelligent green eyes. "The question is whether you believe those things are true only because of your wealth, or whether they might be true for other reasons as well." Marcus felt as though he'd been slapped. The philosophical challenge, delivered with quiet dignity in front of the Meridian Club's most prominent members, left him momentarily speechless. This wasn't how confrontations with service staff were supposed to go. They were supposed to apologize, grovel, and retreat. They weren't supposed to question the fundamental assumptions underlying his worldview. "I don't need philosophy lessons from a waitress," he managed finally, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Something about Sarah's unwavering composure was unsettling him in ways he couldn't understand. "No," Sarah agreed. "You probably don't." She began gathering the remaining napkins, her movements deliberate and controlled. "But sometimes we get what we need rather than what we think we want." Charles stepped forward, clearly sensing that the situation was spiraling beyond his ability to manage diplomatically. "Mr. Wellington, perhaps I could arrange for your dinner to be moved to the private dining room? We could ensure complete privacy while—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. There was something happening here that he didn't understand. Some undercurrent to this confrontation that felt significant beyond a simple dispute over service standards. "I want to finish this conversation right here." Sarah nodded slowly as if she'd been expecting this response. She straightened to her full height again, and when she looked at Marcus this time, he saw something in her expression that made his breath catch. It wasn't defiance or anger, or even professional resignation. It was recognition, as if she were seeing him clearly for the first time, and finding him somehow familiar. "All right, Mr. Wellington," she said quietly. "Let's finish this conversation. But I think you should know that once we do, there's no going back to the way things were 5 minutes ago." Marcus felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Every instinct told him to walk away, to let Charles handle the situation, to retreat to the safety of his wealth and power. But something about Sarah's calm certainty, her suggestion that this moment would change everything, compelled him to stay. "I'm not afraid of a little honesty," he said, though his voice betrayed more uncertainty than he intended. Sarah's smile was sad and knowing. "No, Mr. Wellington, I don't think you are. I think that's exactly what you've been afraid of your entire life." The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a promise, like a threat. And Marcus Wellington, surrounded by the wealth and privilege that had always been his armor against the world, suddenly felt more vulnerable than he had in decades. The silence in the Meridian Club's dining room was deafening. Marcus Wellington stood frozen, Sarah's words echoing in his mind like a bell that couldn't be unrung. "I think that's exactly what you've been afraid of your entire life." The accusation hung between them, more powerful than any boardroom confrontation he'd ever faced. "You don't know anything about me," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Something in Sarah's steady gaze suggested she knew far more than any stranger should. Sarah glanced around the dining room, taking in the sea of expectant faces. Mrs. Pemberton clutched her pearls. Harrison Blackwell leaned forward like he was watching a prize fight, and Charles stood helplessly between them, wringing his hands. The entire New York social elite was witnessing this moment, and Sarah seemed to understand the weight of that audience. "You're right," she said quietly. "I shouldn't presume to know your fears or your motivations. But I do know what I see standing in front of me." She paused, her green eyes never wavering from his face. "I see a man who's built walls so high that he's forgotten what it feels like to connect with another human being without calculating the profit margin first." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "That's enough. You're fired. Charles, get her out of here immediately." But Charles didn't move. Something in Sarah's demeanor, her quiet authority, seemed to command respect, even from the club's management. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small photograph, yellowed with age and worn around the edges. "Before you do that," she said, extending the photo toward Marcus, "I think you should see this." Marcus stared at the photograph without taking it. Even from a distance, he could see it showed a young couple standing outside a small house, the woman pregnant and glowing, the man's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. The man in the photo had Marcus's eyes, his jawline, his smile, but it was a smile Marcus hadn't seen in his own mirror for 20 years. "Where did you get that?" His voice came out as barely a whisper. "From my mother's jewelry box," Sarah replied. She kept it next to her wedding ring, the one she never got to wear because the man she loved decided his business empire was more important than the family he was about to have. The dining room seemed to tilt around Marcus. The faces of the other diners blurred into background noise as the implications of Sarah's words crashed over him like a tidal wave. He reached for the back of his chair to steady himself, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "That's impossible," he managed. "Rebecca and I never had." He stopped mid-sentence, a memory surfacing from the depths of his carefully compartmentalized past. Not Rebecca. Rebecca. Before Caroline. Before any of the society wives and high-profile relationships that had defined his adult life. "Jennifer," he breathed. Sarah nodded slowly. Jennifer Morrison, though I suppose you probably don't remember her last name. She was just the college girl who worked at that little cafe near your first office, wasn't she? The one who made your coffee every morning and listened to your dreams about building a business empire. Marcus sank into his chair, the photograph trembling in Sarah's outstretched hand. 26 years ago, when Wellington Industries was just a one-room operation above a dry cleaner in Queens, Jennifer had been the bright spot in his 18-hour workdays. Sweet, intelligent, supportive, she'd believed in his vision when nobody else would. She never told me, Marcus said, his voice hollow, when things ended between us, she never said she was pregnant. Sarah's expression softened with something that might have been pity. She tried to. She came to your office 3 times in 2 weeks. Your secretary kept telling her you were too busy to see her, that she should make an appointment like everyone else. By the 4th time, you'd already started dating that banker's daughter. What was her name? Stephanie something? Steinberg, Marcus whispered. Stephanie Steinberg. The memory was crystal clear now. How he'd calculated that relationship. How Stephanie's father's connections could open doors that Jennifer's love never could. He'd convinced himself it was just business, just the pragmatic choice of an ambitious young man. Mom never got past the secretary that 4th time, Sarah continued, her voice growing quieter. She saw you through the glass door of your office, laughing with Stephanie, and she realized that whatever you'd shared was already over in your mind. So she left New York, moved back to Ohio, and raised me by herself. The photograph fluttered to the white tablecloth as Sarah finally let it go. Marcus stared at it, seeing his younger self's genuine happiness, remembering what it felt like to love someone without calculating the return on investment. She worked 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, Sarah said. Never spoke badly about you, never told me you were a monster. Just said that some people are meant for different paths and ours didn't run together. She paused, studying Marcus's stricken face. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I held her hand in the hospital room, and do you know what her last words to me were? Marcus couldn't speak. He couldn't even breathe. She said, "Find your father someday, not for him, for you. Everyone deserves to know where they come from, even if they choose not to stay." The dining room had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen sounds from beyond the swing doors seemed muted, as if the entire Meridian Club was holding its breath. Marcus looked up at Sarah, at his daughter, and saw Jennifer's kind eyes staring back at him with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why take a job here? Why not just call me, send a letter?" Sarah's smile was rueful. "Would you have taken the call? Would you have read the letter? Or would your secretary have filtered me out like she did my mother 26 years ago?" She gestured at the opulent dining room around them. "I wanted to see who you'd become first. I wanted to understand what was so important, that it was worth abandoning the woman who loved you and the child you never knew existed." Marcus felt tears threatening for the first time in decades. "And what did you find?" "I found a man who's exactly what my mother said you'd become. Successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams, powerful enough to move mountains with a phone call, wealthy enough to buy anything you want." Sarah's voice grew gentle. "But I also found a man who's forgotten how to see people as anything more than transactions. Who treats a spilled glass of water like a personal attack, because he's so used to controlling every variable in his environment." "I could have helped," Marcus said desperately. "If I'd known about you, about Jennifer's situation, I could have provided for you both." "With money," Sarah said, "you could have provided money. But what my mother needed wasn't your wealth, it was your presence, your love, your commitment to being a partner and a father instead of just a benefactor." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Every defense he'd built around his life's choices crumbled under the weight of this simple truth. He thought about all the relationships he'd approached, like business deals, all the people he'd discarded when they no longer served his purposes, all the moments of genuine human connection he'd sacrificed on the altar of ambition. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice breaking. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those intelligent green eyes that were so much like his own. When she finally spoke, her words were measured, careful. "I don't want your money, if that's what you're asking. I have a job, an education, a life I've built for myself." She paused, glancing around the dining room where New York's elite sat transfixed by their family drama. "But I would like to know my father. Not Marcus Wellington the billionaire. Not the man who destroys companies and ruins lives for profit. Just the person you were before you decided that success was more important than everything else. Marcus stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. Without thinking, he reached across the table and picked up the photograph, studying the young couple who'd been so full of hope and possibility. That version of himself seemed like a stranger now, someone he'd deliberately forgotten in his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. "I don't know if that person still exists," he admitted. Sarah's smile was sad but not unkind. "Maybe not, but maybe it's never too late to find out." She untied her apron with deliberate movements, folding it neatly before placing it on the table. "I'm done with my shift here, both literally and figuratively. If you'd like to continue this conversation somewhere less public, there's a small cafe about 6 blocks from here. It's nothing fancy, just coffee and honest conversation." She started to walk away, then turned back one final time. "Oh, and Mr. Wellington? The next time you're tempted to judge someone's worth by their job or their bank account, remember that the waitress you just tried to humiliate is a graduate of Columbia Medical School. I work here because I choose to, not because I have to. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we least expect to teach us." With that, Sarah Morrison, his daughter, walked out of the Meridian Club, leaving Marcus Wellington standing in the ruins of everything he thought he knew about his life, clutching a photograph of the man he used to be and wondering if it was possible to find his way back to him. For the first time in 26 years, Marcus Wellington understood that he had a choice to make that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. He could remain the man who valued transactions over relationships, or he could walk 6 blocks to a small cafe and begin the long journey of becoming a father. As he looked around the dining room at the shocked faces of Manhattan's elite, Marcus realized that for once in his adult life, the most important decision he'd ever make wouldn't be discussed in a boardroom or negotiated by lawyers. It would be decided by whether he had the courage to choose love over fear, connection over control, and the unknown possibility of redemption over the familiar comfort of his golden isolation. The photograph in his hand seemed to whisper a question that would determine the rest of his life. What kind of man do you want to be? Marcus Wellington straightened his shoulders, left a $100 bill on the table to cover his unfinished dinner, and walked toward the door where his daughter, and perhaps his soul, was waiting for him in the October rain. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.